The new Thespian Corporation was technically a part of the federated interests of Sagittarius, but it rarely acted like it. Traditionally, it kept to itself, quietly developing the newest line of domestic service droids, or engaging in the borderline Sisyphean task of maintaining New Ulysses' infrastructure, which dated back to the days of the Terran Federation. To interfere in the foreign policy of other megacorporations was rare. To interfere in their internal dealings, unthinkable. Thus, when the Vloster Corporation C-suite proposed an expedition to the Great Orrery, it came as a surprise to them when NT Corp lodged a protest, and a much greater one when they called a summit of all 50 corporations in the federated interests over it. "What is your problem?" The Lyran CFO of V-Corp buzzed through his quills, his voice translated through a droid. "We have made dozens of expeditions into old corporation space before, and only now do you protest? We are on the brink of securing the greatest marvel of engineering in the history of the sector, and now you balk at it? I didn't know Sims could be so spineless." The humanoid form, body smooth and beautiful as a marble statue, regarded the Lyran coldly from the other side of the table. His eyes flared a cautionary yellow, the only emotion his petrified face could show. "You mistake prudence for cowardice," he said, voice resounding, his eyes flashing in time with his speech. "Believe me, if we could seize the Orrery, we would have done it centuries ago. As it is, the entire federated interests put together couldn't take it." "What would stop us, huh?" the Lion retorted. "The old corporation is extinct, Chairman. It has been for almost 2,000 years. "And the Solar Empire was playing around with sticks and stones, you said." The Chairman banged his fist on the table, eyes red. "How many of your contractors died on Earth? The Orrery is unsettled for a reason. You are playing with fire, and it's a matter of time before it dooms us all." "You didn't answer his question." The CEO of Panopticon, a stone-faced Polushi, hissed, shaking his antenna in discomfort at the Chairman. "Now would you please elaborate on what dangers the Orrery has in store? Preferably not so loud either." The Chairman stayed silent, his eyes turning blue. "Chairman?" After a while he spoke, voice grim. "The new Thespian Corporation maintains no records of its encounters with its predecessor. I can only assure you that we have indeed encountered them." "And you have no evidence of this?" "None," the Chairman said sardonically, cocking his head. The Polushi's antenna twitched. "Then Panopticon chooses to disbelieve you." "And so does Vloster," the Lyran said. "And I question what has brought you here if you only intend to stall us with complaints without substance. Are you finally going senile, you ancient piece of trash?" "I suspect I'm more sane than any of you," the Chairman answered without missing a beat. "That's it," the Lyran said, throwing his hands up. "I call a vote. All in favor of overturning this frivolous protest?" 49 hands went up. "Motion carries," the Lyran said, with as close to a smile as his species could make. "Every corporation capable of raising an expeditionary force will do so. All others will support them with funding, supplies, and equipment. All participating corporations will be given stake in the system, according to their contributions as agreed. Any questions?" The Chairman was the only one to speak up. "My company will have no part in this," he said flatly, standing up. "Then you will have no part in the federated interests," the Lyran said, glaring at him. "So tread carefully, machine. NT Corp is just a computer company." "Indeed," the Chairman said with a nod, opening the door out of the meeting chamber. "Which is why, out of all of you, we're the most likely to survive." "He's speaking nonsense," the Lyran laughed, a few other executives joining him. "What makes you so special?" "We're not worth killing," the Chairman said. The tone of his voice suggested he'd be smiling if he could. "I suggest you find your families somewhere safe to go. The gates of New Ulysses will be open for them." With that, he left them to their preparations, and silently hoped they'd take him up on his offer. He knew firsthand what the old corporation was capable of. He knew it so well he had to burn the memories away. Here she is, Commodore, Naginata cried, pointing to the screens in the bridge that gave a visual feed of the outside. They made it through the dead sphere, the 9 systems surrounding the Orrery. They were all stripped bare, presumably for the material to construct it. Yes, indeed it, Glaive said, looking out for the barest moment, but the second she saw the Orrery, all her dismissiveness fell away and she stared, enraptured like everyone else. At its center was a great silver sphere, far larger than the star it contained, orbited by 3 spinning concentric rings. From these rings came 3 blinding beams of energy like golden threads, connecting the megastructure and the 3 worlds that orbited it, and providing just enough light to make out the bumps and ridges on the sphere's surface. The first explorers to stumble across the system after the Federation's collapse noted its similarity to the devices the ancients used to track the movements of planets, and so it was named the Great Orrery. Looking at it, Glaive couldn't help but wonder how many planets' worth of matter went into this one stellar-scale machine. Did the ancients think it was worth it, to power 3 planets? The Federation was megalomaniac in its last days, sure, but not so much as to strip down whole systems to keep the lights on. But it was a Dyson sphere, the ancient dreams of humanity clarified in one structure, not just to touch the stars, but to conquer them. That it remained functional over the millennia since its creator's fall was nothing short of a marvel, or at least a testament to human engineering. Just selling off the energy would make them all rich, and to think about what they could do if they harnessed it themselves. Glaive sensed one hell of a bonus in her immediate future, if she pulled this off. Scans, Glaive said. 2 or 3 planets giving no heat sigs, ma'am, the census officer reported. Getting backscatter off planet 2, they've still got lights on. Naginata, what does NT Corp call these planets? Glaive looked over at her retainer. That one is Penelope, Naginata said, pointing to the innermost planet on the system chart, then to the outermost. Telemachus, then finally to the middle. Ulysses. Would you look at that, Glaive chuckled, and they say they hate the old Corp. You think anyone's left on it? Naginata mused. They're extinct, Adjutant, Glaive chuckled. Don't be silly. She turned to the navigator. Ulysses, full steam. Like that, the bridge launched into a flurry of activity. Donning their headsets, the officers all leaned into their consoles and got to work. All craft change bearing, 115 by -059er. Prepare for flip and burn. Foster Suzuki acknowledges, one officer called over the feed. Veltratech acknowledges. Maelstrom PMC acknowledges. Steadying herself on the armrest of her chair, Glaive felt her stomach drop as the ship wrenched downward, then boosted hard towards the second planet in the system. In the darkness of space behind them, she could just barely make out the 100-strong swarm of spacecraft following them. All warfare was a function of numbers, both in terms of forces and their capabilities. The solar disaster was simply a product of Volster underestimating the enemies. Thankfully, Glaive thought, they had no intent to be underkill this time around. This world has a lot of surprises, Glaive noted during the descent towards one of the planet's larger parks. Though it had no sun, day was provided by a massive flat ring that circled the planet, its inner side lined with unfathomably powerful lamps, turned on and off in sequence to give light and heat to the overgrown cities on its surface. Even abandoned for millennia, they were eerily well preserved. The buildings stood almost pristine, save for the creepers and kudzu which covered everything. The only sounds were the whistling of wind between the buildings and some sort of music? A few windows were broken, and the synth rubber had disintegrated off the car's wheels, but Glaive otherwise had to convince herself that someone wasn't going to bump into her on their daily commute through here. This made it almost not a surprise when Glaive found a woman awaiting her as she left her ship. She was human, on the younger side, maybe late 20s. Though Glaive had never been good at estimating humans' ages. Wearing a suit and tie with her hair in a braid, she reclined on an ancient bench, playing a little stringed instrument that hummed when she dragged a bow across it. No one else was nearby. Glaive gestured to a squad of Veltra Marines to follow her, alongside Naginata, then approached, one hand on her service pistol. "Hey," she called, antenna perking up. Apparently someone calling her was more effective at getting her attention than landing a spacecraft. She stood, packed her instrument up into a case, and waved. "Hello," she called back. "Identify yourself," Glaive barked. "Cut to the chase, eh? Well, I'm Valerie. My friends call me Val," she said with a laugh. "You're the first warm bodies I've seen around here in a long time. What's the galaxy like these days?" Glaive paused, remaining a good 20 meters from Valerie. Reaching for her antenna piece, she said, "I don't trust her. Sweep the area." Then she looked back at the woman. "How long have you been here?" "I think I was about 18 when I first came, but, God, that must have been so long ago, right? I'm probably like 1800 now," Valerie said, putting her hand to her forehead. "But I don't know. I don't have any wrinkles, so I guess I'm still pretty young. But, I mean, you never know, right? Maybe I just aged well." "That girl's nuttier than squirrel shit," one of the Marines whispered. "Castaway, no doubt," Naginata said, almost sorrowfully. "Poor mate must have gone mad with loneliness." "Don't give her your tears, adjutant. You know the procedure," Glaive said, stepping forward. "We can offer you passage off-world. It's free of charge." "That's a pretty nice offer. Hold on. Wait, she said, turning a full circle. "I need to get my stuff first. You want to go with?" "I don't have time for this," Glaive said, a warning tone in her voice. Naginata eyed her, one hand nudging aside a hand grenade as it crept towards his sidearm. "Not yet," Glaive mouthed. She wanted to see where Valerie was going with this. "I'll be coming back in." She looked at the enormous spaceship behind her, then at the sun in the sky. 10 minutes. "Area's clear," Glaive heard someone report over the airwaves. Glaive thought for a few seconds and then said, "Very well, but my escort comes too." "Oh, absolutely," Valerie said, nodding emphatically. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable or anything like that. That'd be rude, right?" "Walk, now," Glaive said. Turning her mic on, she said over the military comms, "Keep setting up the base camp. I'll be back in 10 mics." "Right," Valerie said, turning on her heel and starting to walk down the little path that led out to the park. Glaive and her Marines made haste to follow behind, but not too closely. They wouldn't trust such a patently unstable girl until the civility had been trained back into her anyways. As they walked, the path eventually merged into a sidewalk and a street, and that was when Glaive noticed the first of dozens of pill-shaped clean white pods that lined the roads. Naginata yelped as he passed the first one. Glaive realized why as she followed him. The front of the pod, it turned out, was clear, and the empty eye sockets of a human skull stared back at her from its place atop a pile of bones as she peered inside. "What is this?" Glaive asked Valerie, pointing at the pod. "The old people here, they, slit the mortal form in there," Valerie said, dancing around the more obvious word. "It was probably better than starving to death. I hear they didn't have the infrastructure to grow food after the fall." "So they're suicide booths," Glaive said. Valerie shrugged. "Not really." They kept on. Glaive couldn't help but notice the mannequins in the shop windows. Why did the old corporation love their mannequins so much? They put them everywhere, even in stores that didn't sell clothes. Moreover, why did they insist on making them as durable and human-like as possible? It made them a nightmare to get rid of, not to mention scaring the daylights out of the lower ranks during expeditions. They could have at least saved some time and not given them all different faces. Abruptly, Valerie started jogging and turned a corner, leaving Glaive and her escorts running to keep up. "Hey! Hey!" Glaive called, stopping to peek around the corner before following. It seemed that this street was a special one. Rather than leading into other streets in the grid, as human road planning generally dictated, it led straight into the parking garage of a large tower, easily 100 floors and crowned with the shining logo of the old corporation, a logo that NT Corp had long since discontinued for reasons unknown. Valerie hummed a tune as she walked up to the sliding doors, then made a gesture as though casting a spell and giggled when they opened for her. "Wait up, damn it!" Glaive chastised her, then looked down at the PDA on her arm. "Coming up in 10 minutes, Glaze said, ducking under the doorframe. She didn't know why humans insisted on having ceilings tall enough for a Pelushi female, but still using human-sized doors. At least the lobby looked nice and clean. It reminded her of board meetings back home. Well, it did, save for the 24 mannequins Valerie had apparently set up around the room to make it look like the place was still in business. Glaive almost felt sorry for her. "Yeah, exactly," Valerie confirmed. "I'll be coming back in 10 minutes. It's not been 10 minutes, so I'm not coming back." "You're trying my patience, Glaive cut herself off, then simply said, "Don't waste my time." "It's right here," Valerie said, flopping over one of the couches and fumbling with the lock on the steamer trunk beside it. "I can show you my things now." "You can, sure," Glaive nodded. Valerie wasn't facing her now. Slowly, quietly, she crept up behind her. It was always better to do it like this. Better because they weren't as likely to try to pull something, and better because Glaive didn't have to look them in the eye for this part. With a half, Glaive lunged forward, grabbing Valerie by her hair and yanking her to her feet with one hand, while the other jammed her pistol into Valerie's neck. Okay," Valerie exclaimed. "We keep our hands to ourselves, people." "Valerie, you are now the rightful and lawful property of the Vloster Corporation," Glaive said, reciting the words of this little litany by heart. "All of your possessions and assets are hereby confiscated, and you will be assigned to a designated training and onboarding center until you are prepared and willing to provide your labor to the corporation. Your behavior is now bound by Bylaw 212343A, subsection C of V Corp Code. Any deviations from the code of conduct established there will be met with civil and criminal penalties. Your designation is..." Reaching into her pocket, Glaive fetched a little syringe gun and pressed it into the back of Valerie's neck, pulling the trigger. The gun made a little popping noise of air pressure being released, and then Glaive felt something bounce off her forehead. Looking down, she found a tiny microchip on the ground, and looking back up, she found that Valerie's neck was unscathed. "We'll skip that part then," she said, shaking her head to clear the confusion. "Naginata, cuff her, and tell the quartermaster to have a neuroforming mask on standby." "Yes, ma'am," Naginata nodded, putting in the call while he pulled Valerie's hands behind her back. "This is a hell of a way to treat your host," Valerie complained, as Glaive pulled her around and started marching her back to the ship. "Shut up," Glaive said, then turned to Naginata. "Fetch the instrument case." Naginata picked it up, undid the clasps and looked inside. His eyes widened. "It's an older violin," he marveled. "This thing must be worth a fortune." Glaive looked at her captive and chuckled. "Well, you just keep on giving, don't you?" she teased Valerie, tugging on her ear. "I wouldn't sell that off," Valerie said. "Some things are worth more than money." "And money can buy most of those things. Your point?" Valerie rolled her eyes. "Philistines," she said. Eventually they came back up on the ship, where a uniformed Huron stood at attention waiting for them, a black glass mask in one hand. "Your stop," Glaive said with a smirk, shoving Valerie ahead. Without missing a beat, the quartermaster grabbed her arm and pulled it behind her, turning her around to face Glaive while he awaited Glaive's order. Valerie didn't seem to notice. "I've had a lot of time to think, Glaive," she said, looking down pensively. "If your company had the power of a god in its hands, what would it do?" "What are you talking about, slave?" Glaive said, dragging out the last word so Valerie could taste it herself. Valerie didn't react. She could probably tell what the answer would be anyway. "The best thing that ever happened to the old corporation was when we realized that money didn't matter," she said, almost spitting her words out with a tone more of disgust than anger or fear. "The invisible hand of the market should have slapped you down a long time ago." Glaive only rolled her eyes and gave a glance to the quartermaster. Nodding, the officer grabbed Valerie's braid, pulling her head back and forced the mask on. With a hiss, it sealed to her face, mechanical tendrils lashing out and securing it to her head like a spider, and then it began making a high, almost insectile warbling noise. Valerie straightened and then stumbled forward. "Oh no, my brain," she said, in a posh mock British accent, spinning around and sighing dramatically. "My precious brainwaves, they're being washed. Oh, it's a life of slavery for me. Farewell, cruel world." By this point, she caught the attention of the companies of soldiers who had been laying out tents and accommodations, and they all got to watch as, with a loud tearing of metal, Valerie wrenched her cuffs in two, smacked the back of her hand on the mask where her forehead would be so hard that the surface cracked, and swooned into Naginata's arms. "Rosebud," she whispered, then looked around for a second before letting her head drop. And then she burst out laughing. No, I can't," she said, standing up before a second fit overcame her. "I can't keep a straight face. Oh my God, the looks on your faces. I'd watch every comedy special you people made if you could be this funny on purpose. Hold on. I have to send this to Emperor Solomon. It'll kill him." Valerie paused to tap her temple twice, then made a peculiar shuddering noise. "Oh, wait," she said before starting to laugh again. "I took a picture of the mask. Hold on." She put a hand on her chin and pulled, and like that, the mask came off, its tendrils whining in protest, and finally snapping as she cast it away. Instantly, every soldier in the vicinity leveled their rifles at her, but she didn't seem to mind, instead fixing her hair as she talked. "Oh yeah, you can point whatever at me if it makes you feel better. So, Commodore," she said, "how small-minded do you think we are?" "What?" "Well, not you," Valerie corrected herself, pointing at Glaive. "Your company. How long have you been aware of the Orrery? 3 centuries? 4? And yet every time someone makes mention of it on comms, I hear Dyson Sphere. Dyson Sphere, Dyson Sphere. I mean, Ulysses was a pretty energy-intensive planet, but I didn't leave the fridge open that often. Can you imagine pitching that at the shareholder meeting? They would have skinned me alive." "You're from the old corporation?" Naginata said incredulously. "How?" "Well, my slaving friend. Violin, please, thank you." Valerie smiled, taking her violin back from his shaking hands. "Long story short, as the last CEO of the Thespian Corporation, I was the first person in the history of the company to realize you can't eat money when the Federation collapsed. So, while billions of employees across our space were busy eating their shoes, I made the most difficult decision of my life." Abruptly, she jabbed her finger straight up. "To be fair, you are right. Technically, it is a Dyson Sphere. Well, a bunch of Dyson Spheres on top of each other, if we really want to get in the nitty-gritty. But it's not really for the power bill. Say, ever heard of a Matryoshka brain?" Silence. "Wow, I wish the audiences at my product reveals were this polite," Valerie chuckled. "Honestly, this practically is a product reveal, so thank you. Anyways, we built the most powerful supercomputer in the history of the universe for a Fed contract and powered it with a star. And, well, they weren't using it, so we built our own little cosmos in it." She went on. She seemed almost mournful now. "I wish it didn't come to that, sure, but we were going to die if we didn't. And it's not bad there at all. We have each other, we have the minds we created and raised as our own, we have the worlds that we built together in there. We have lives in there, families. What gives you the right to own our world?" Glaive huffed dismissively. "You're not using it." Valerie's mouth drew into a line. Her voice came out like she was explaining something to a dim child. "I just told you how we were." "To do what?" Glaive laughed. "Play dolls with AI and act like they're your kids? They're not real and neither are you, machine." "Commodore Parissa Glaive, daughter of Tao, you are a flesh robot powered by meat computer," Valerie snapped. "Do you think we dominated the galaxy by the power of being softer, smaller, and squishier than most of the races in it? We're still human. We just changed out the hardware. And what would you do with the Orrery, huh? Trade stocks faster? We gave billions of people a chance at life, and you'd throw it all away for your bottom line. Don't lie to me." "Oh my God. Does your train of thought have a caboose?" Glaive said, throwing her hands up. "You are wasting my time." "That's just it," Valerie said. She was laughing again, mockingly this time. "You know, from every V-Corp file I've read, you are an exemplar of Loss's intransigence. You are positively obstinate in destroying everything of value in the universe to make numbers go up like a fucking chimpanzee. You have me convinced the Emperor is a better person than me. I don't know how the hell we put up with Vlos's middle management like he did. So why bother? Oh, yeah, sorry. I swear I was getting somewhere, Valerie said. Yeah, I just like hearing the sound of my own voice, honestly. And we needed a few minutes for the boarding cruise to hit the fleet. As if on cue, Glaive's antenna started to register the slightest vibration in the air. She barely consciously comprehended it before it became a bone-shaking roar that sent shockwaves through her nervous system. Clutching her antenna and falling to her knees, she looked up just in time to watch the MSS Pinnacle stenciling burn off the hull of a Maelstrom battleship as it shot overhead like an arrow, impacting beyond the horizon with a distant boom. Further up, she watched the little shooting stars that were her fleet, now all scuttled, as they fell and fell. You bitch! Naginata cried, drawing his pistol at the woman and... What was that pin on the ground? And why did the spoon pop off of one of Naginata's grenades? Wait! It's on me! Get it off! Get it off! Naginata yelped, patting himself down and trying to pull the grenade away. Glaive, help! But Glaive had already unslung the bandolier from her chest and tossed it at Valerie. Glaive, please! Glaive! Sorry, buddy, Glaive only said, shoulder checking him back at Valerie as hard as she could. Staggering back with a scream, Naginata might have said something else, but Glaive couldn't hear it over the sound of him detonating. She felt the force hit her in the chest like a pile driver, and then she was thrown back and away. Down, down, down. Gunfire. Someone was shooting. People were screaming. Glaive forced her eyes open, but what she got out of them didn't make any sense. One of her eyes wasn't working. Bullets didn't stop in midair like that, and people didn't crawl on buildings. They were clambering between windows, swinging off light poles like apes, dancing around the shots as they advanced on her men. She recognized one or two of the faces from the lobby and the storefronts. She tasted blood. Her exoskeleton stung like hell all over, and she could feel something wet and warm staining her uniform. Raising a shaking hand to her eye, she couldn't find it through the blood coursing down her face. And that was when she noticed Valerie. Smiling, she walked through the gunfire, eye set on Glaive. The Federated interests are so funny to me, she said. Voice echoed over Glaive's antenna piece. A bullet seemingly appeared hovering in the air in front of her face as she talked, and she plucked it out of the air, flipped it like a coin, and flicked it back to the shooter with one finger. You all just think you're the most important people in the universe, and I don't normally agree with the Solar Emperor on matters of philosophy, but he'd say that we're all raindrops in God's ocean, and I have watched as you've proven the rule every time you try to be the exception. And look, I get it. Our time has passed. I'm not going to call the corporation, or anyone who remembers the Federation, the rightful rulers of the galaxy. We forfeited that when we watched it become the monster it was and didn't speak up. She sighed. The sound turned to a growl towards the end. But that doesn't give you jack shit of a right to take it out on our kids. They're not real, Glaive tried to affirm, but it came out as more of a whine. There was a pair of hands on her shoulders holding her down. Why were they warm? Like real humans. Why was the gunfire stopping? Why was it so quiet all of a sudden? The interests will hear about this. They'll blow the Orrery to scrap. They're more real than your bottom line, Valerie chuckled, squatting in front of Glaive. And yeah, they will hear about it, but not from you and not from your fleet. I normally don't like doing this, but given your attitude, I suspect it's coming time we cut your folks down to size. I mean, you shouldn't be mad. It's a dog-eat-dog social Darwinist world, right? Glaive tried to lash out at Valerie, but the hand on her shoulder darted out to her elbow and pinned it to the asphalt with an unholy strength. Glaive said it was spitting in her face instead. You can't get away with this, she wailed. I'll fight you, I swear it. Valerie could only nod as she deftly undid the clasp on Glaive's holster and pulled out her pistol. Yeah, you would, she admitted, pulling back the slide with a muted click snap. And that's why you were never going to leave this place alive.